The Walking Dead Universe role-playing game by Freely Publishing has been released in late 2023. I was a huge fan of the Walking Dead comic book series by Robert Kirkman, and I remember I had to pause at times reading between issues because that series is pretty much one of the most brutal and heartbreaking stories I've ever read in the zombie genre, even though no one calls them zombies in Walking Dead. I enjoyed the Walking Dead television series, especially the early seasons, and despite my love for all things zombies, I wasn't sure how I would feel about this core rulebook because right now I'm sort of done with the television series. I know there's two spin-offs and they've been critically acclaimed, but at this point I'm not sure. Hello, my name is Manny, and I'm here with my good friend Sean. Sean and I have known each other, wow, since the late '90s. We played Legend of Five Rings, first edition, back in the day.
Yeah. So we both have, I guess, a lifelong love of RPGs, and that's probably what we based our friendship off at first. But since then, we've known each other for years, and it's been great to be part of helping out Really Dicey.
Yeah, for those of you that may not know, Sean's been helping me out behind the scenes on a lot of different projects for Really Dicey, and this is first. This is our first video together, so I'm very excited about that. And he had a chance to play this at PAX Unplugged.
Big shout out to Lurking Fear. They're a great group of people that help make sure Free League's content for their conventions
Mm,
is, well received and presented to the public. So
mm.
big shout out to them.
So yeah, welcome to Really Dicey, where we interview your favorite RPG writers and creators, as well as do reviews from time to time. Please, if you enjoy this content, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. So today we're going to go through the Walking Dead universe core rulebook, and we're going to just go through chapter by chapter and talk about what we like best about this book, and maybe some criticisms, depending. So yeah, let's do the first one. Introduction. Pretty self-explanatory.
So yeah, exactly. Chapter one, it's your basic, standard introduction, gives you your setting, your core mechanics. Doesn't dive in too deep, but it just gives touches upon these, as well as things like that drive, issues, anchors. Talks about dice and stress, but importantly, it does bring up the topic of safety tools, which I feel is important in any game that can touch on sensitive issues and topics that some people might not want to have to deal with in a game they're just playing to enjoy.
I think what I like best about this chapter, it doesn't come outright and say it. So my issue with certain zombie games in general is that when you play them so that yourself and the rest of the play characters try to survive. You don't care about the NPCs. You know, sometimes the moral compass is all over the place. So it's all about like survival to the fullest extent. And okay, that makes sense. In some ways, but I feel like that could make certain games kind of like uh, have only one type of tone. But with this kind of tells you that okay, you're gonna need these either player characters or other NPCs in your game because you need that connection in order to survive. Keeping yourself mentally and emotionally healthy for your characters in this game is very important.
All right. As it does say later on in the book, NPCs, they're important because they're the only humans left. Humanity is just all this, every life matters, because these people are there, you're there, and without them, every death is a detriment to your survival and humanity.
Yeah, which we'll get into in the other chapters. But I think this is a really good introduction. Basically, it has the same things you see in most role playing games, where it tells you like what's a role playing game. It gives you that definition, some aspect about the world that you're playing in case you're not familiar with the TV series. And I think again, being that I'm very familiar with the TV series, it was a very easy read because I know the setting. So chapter two, the World of the Dead. For anyone who's familiar with this would be a very easy chapter to read because it gives you all the information you need to start your setting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the important thing about it is even if you are familiar with the comics or the TV show, then this gives you all of those elements in the context of what it will be like for a game setting, so that you don't miss things that maybe are important, and you're able to emphasize those things that really bring the game to life, especially the walkers, because to me, the show always depicts the walkers in a way that's sort of a mystery because you either, I mean, maybe they went to the CDC and, found out this is how the disease or the effect was being caused, but you're always sort of just learning by observing through the show how walkers operate. And what I really like about this chapter is that it gives you some mechanics to understand that better.
This chapter also kind of emphasizes again that people are very important to the I don't want to say the theme of the game, but for your survival, you need people. You see it throughout the book also, but I love these little stories within these
Hmm.
chapters. And the little stories are very interesting because it shows you the breakdown of morality within the characters that they're giving examples of in the story. And it's like you're kind of looking at this like, okay, I can see as a game master how this could work in the game. How at one point when do people start breaking? I kind of love the realistic aspect of it, where it looks like you're slowly going mad. But I'm going too far ahead, But I love that you see the seeds of it right now in this chapter.
Yeah, and actually, the impression I got of this game over time is that The Walking Dead remind me completely of the concept of the floor is lava. That
Mm.
it's not about the lava per se, but the walkers are always there. They're always a threat, and you're trying not to get killed by them. But the real challenge is surviving. And to survive, you need each other.
Chapter 3, the player characters. This chapter is very self-explanatory. You pick an archetype, and then you go forth and make a name, your issues and drives, and your attributes and skills. But the last one, describing your starting haven, Sean, you had a good point about it. Your haven is pretty much the safest place in the game where you and your NPCs and PCs are together, where you can heal.
Yeah, it's very important. As we'll find out later on, anchors are very important to individual players, but the haven is important to everyone. And without a safe place to lay your head, that can really make your survival and your day-to-day life stressful and difficult. Looking at this game and thinking about havens, I feel like the opportunity to create your haven is so wide that limited only by your imagination. That your haven could be anything. It could be an airport. It could be a military base. It could be a power plant, a nuclear station. So that in some ways, your haven might define your characters.
Mm.
So if it was a military base, maybe everybody's a military archetype, but maybe different types, like a medic or a communications person or as a rifleman. So I feel that in some ways, the haven might define your group just as much as the individual players. So one thing about the archetype is that there is a limited number of archetypes right now, and I would expect and hope that we're going to see expansions for more archetypes because we all know that in society there are uh, an infinite number of possibilities when it comes to people and our backgrounds and skills and what we bring as a person to our relationships to other people in the world. So I feel like it's quite limited based on what they're giving us, but I expect that that's just going to expand, or maybe you have to use your imagination.
Criminal, doctor, farmer, homemaker, the kid, law enforcer, the nobody, the outcast, the politician, the preacher, the scientist, the soldier. And each one has you pick an issue, you can pick a drive, you get to roll 3 times for gear. Then you also pick the relationship to other characters. Are they your friend? Are you just curious about them? Are they your lover? Are they your rival? And so forth.
Yeah, I feel that this is the meat and potatoes of the game itself, that your issues, your drive, and your relationships to other people, to me, that's what really makes this game the most enjoyable to play and gives it uh, the the flavor that is the Walking Dead universe.
There's also charts here about your NPC survivors, your NPCs that are around you during the game. And I like that they give you like a chart, like if you want to pick something really fast, you could do so. I'm sure game masters can retool this to their own liking, but I'm glad that's available. So that way you don't have to sort of think about what to do about that on the fly. There's some discussion here also about hit points, just as brutal as the TV show. They call it health points. You're either unharmed, three health points. 2 health points is bruised, 1 health point is battered, and 0 you're broken. And broken doesn't mean dead, but it does mean you get some sort of major physical issue, maybe mental issue as well, which can lead to death. So one thing also, it has some rules here about your breaking points. In the game, you have two anchors I believe you start with. One's a PC, one's an NPC. And if they get killed or disappear, you may have to roll to see how overwhelmed you are. And it could be something as devastating internally, like losing your drive. You could be shattered, mental breakdown of some sort. You become paranoid, start talking to the dead, think the walkers are still alive, all sorts of really interesting stuff.
There's many great tables in this book, but I do find it interesting how certain roles are weighted, because on that overwhelm table, for instance, it's if you roll the on a D6, if you roll a 1 or 2, you lose your drive. If you roll a 6, your issue changes. You gain another one. But 3, 4, and 5, like you have a 50% chance to become shattered.
Chapter 4, Skills and Talents. So the majority of this game uses the Year Zero engine by Free League Publishing, which you find in Alien, which you find in Blade Runner, and some other games that they use. So if you're familiar with that, you know what to expect. If you're not, the concept is pretty simple. You combine your attributes score, could be let's say 2 for strength, and a skill. You add those dice together. You only use D6s. You add all the dice together, you roll, and if you roll a 6, you succeed. If you don't, you fail. You can push for the roll, and then you get stress dice from that, and that's when things get a little complicated, because if that stress dice is always with all your rolls, and if you roll a 1, bad things happen.
Yeah,
Uh,
stress management in this game is definitely something everyone will get very familiar with.
there's only 4 attributes, and there's 12 skills. There's also stress factors involved that could give you stress dice. You know, if you're being shot at, that could give you stress. If you're bitten, that would definitely get you stress.
When you roll the stress die and you get the big hand or a 1, they call that messing up. Now, what I like about a lot of this game is it's very interpretive. So as long as you have a creative imagination, if you don't, they have great tables for that. Anything from you hurt yourself, you get lost, you lose a hostage. So, depending on the situation you're in, a lot of things can happen. It doesn't always have to be that the threat level increases, which we'll cover in a bit. Messing up can just mean complications that make it more interesting.
So that people understand, it's very possible that you could roll a bunch of 6s on your normal dice and be successful, and still roll a 1 on your stress dice and make these complicated. So you could be, yeah, you may be able to roll a 6 and you close the door tightly against the walkers trying to come in, but because of that one, oh no, you forgot about the windows and suddenly the walkers are coming through. Game masters will probably enjoy some of the improv and creative situations that could come from the dice. And of course, if you roll multiple 6s, that's even more of a critical success. And in this section, they give you the description of all your skills from medicine, leadership. When you pick a archetype, you get your talents. I think you pick one under the talents,
Yeah,
or
it's
all
very
of it.
specific. Yeah, so you have like the criminal's talents or your doctor's talents. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very specific. So it's one of the biggest delineators between archetypes are the talents.
And I like that the way +1s, +2s work is that you just get more dice. So if I'm helping your character and I give you a +1 because of that, you just get +1 means +1 dice to your roll.
Right.
Very very simple and straightforward.
But this is where I like what the game kind of requires players to do, and that is when it comes to like helping or when you have what they call parallel activities or even just extra successes, it requires you to give a legitimate explanation as to how you'd be able to help someone. Because if we're both swimming for the boat, as the example is in the book, just because I roll an extra success doesn't mean I'm just like making it easier for you to swim to the boat. Unless I could say that, hey, maybe I had a line, you were tied off together, and I'm helping to pull you across. Um, so anyway, it doesn't just let you hand wave a lot of that, like other games might say. Like, I mean, we play a lot of Star Wars together, and there's a lot of passing of dice and helping each other out, and a lot of interpretation in that game.
Hmm.
And in this game, it makes you at least keep it in the context of what's happening. And if you can't legitimately give a reason to how you're helping that person out with those extra rolls or whatever, then makes you
Hmm.
be more aware of your surroundings and the situation.
Chapter 5, Combat and Healing. I find the combat system for the Year Zero engine pretty straightforward. If it's one to one, and again, there's charts for this also, so it's like right there. So if we we roll, it depends on the number of successes we have against each other, or even
Mhm.
not. So let's say if I'm fighting against you, we roll our d6s. If I have one success over you, then I win. If you have one over me, you win. If we
They
get the
cancel
same
each
number,
other out, we both win.
yeah, that which is weird. Like, so if I'm trying to hit you and we both get the same number of successes, we hit each other. Which is really interesting.
Right, because things are simultaneous depending on your activity.
Yeah, and of course we none of us get successes and none of us deal damage to each other. So yeah, again, it's pretty straightforward. There's a chart for critical injuries, which I think is really helpful.
Yeah,
How to really,
critical injuries is a really good table. There's only one I have an issue with, and that is if you roll a 12 and you get broken fingers, it says recovery time is hours. I, I mean, the rest of them are really good, but I'm thinking, well, maybe some sprained fingers would be hours, but broken fingers, I'm imagining days to weeks like other broken
yeah.
things. So, but otherwise, yeah, I love the table's good. It is unforgiving as far as you have the same amount of chance to get an impaled heart as you do to get winded, which is not necessarily balanced. I mean,
Hmm.
that's where, like we've seen maybe in other games, there's a step system to where if you have one crit, then your range is within here. But then if you get a second crit, it expands the
Hmm.
list that you can dip into. So the fact that one crit could kill you or wind you is a little bit unforgiving.
The relieving stress section is very important, and again, this is why you want your anchors to be as safe as possible, because that's the only one of the few ways you can relieve stress in the game. You have to. I believe if you have too much stress, you spend time at least an hour at least for one stress point with your anchor. Like hanging out with them, and that helps diminish your stress after some time. So you
Yeah,
want to keep them
actually,
alive.
your anchor significantly increases the amount of stress that you can get rid of. So
Hmm.
without them, yeah, you're limited and it takes a long time. But with
Hmm.
with your anchor, which is
Hmm.
good, they offer you, they really require to have two at all times. An NPC, again, emphasizing the importance of NPCs in your haven, and another player character to reinforce that connection between the players themselves. For other hazards, this is another part of the game that is definitely exciting because you get into things like explosives, and we all know how that works with walkers
Hmm.
and fire. But poisons seem really brutal to me because you can die from poisons very easy in this game. So it just emphasizes, I think, the frailty of a society that is collapsed. You don't have all of the supporting services that you normally would. And some things, other hazards, can be, I mean, just getting sick. They mentioned disease.
Hmm.
That can be detrimental. So there's again that the fragility of society, of your precarious situation you're in. So other hazards can be just as dangerous, if not more, than the Walking Dead that are
Hmm.
all around you.
Threat level. It's very different from other games. I know, like Star Wars, from Edge and FFG and Star Trek. Actually, also some Modifius games actually has that. Like the idea of threats. Instead, there's like levels to it. The more noise you make, the more of a commotion you make in your area. If you're not being sneaky enough, if you drop that pipe by accident in an empty warehouse in the middle of nowhere, you increase the level of
Yeah.
threats. More walkers start appearing. Just like in the TV show, after a while, there'll be a sea of them, and you're in trouble.
Yeah. And that's where I think this is where the game master has to manage that in a quote unquote realistic fashion.
Hmm.
And that's because not every mess up needs to increase the threat level. The reason I say that it should be managed in a quote unquote realistic way is because if you go into a house and you've got no walkers in sight, but then you drop a bookcase, threat level will escalate the number of walkers like almost exponentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that instead of going from it'd be hard to imagine if you messed up 5 times in the house and all of a sudden you've got 1,000 walkers outside. So
No, I'm
yeah,
sorry. I'm so bad. I can see game masters where like you drop the book in the house and suddenly there's like walkers come out of the couch. I'm like, what? Where did that come from? It's a
yeah,
BS. Yeah, no, I agree. You got to use common sense. You know, I mean, obviously, if you're cooking food inside a house that you know is empty, you know it's clear, but maybe that forces you to be creative somewhere. Maybe if you're not careful and you know burn your food, the smoke may attract
yeah.
something from outside, or you know fire alarms go off. You know, or you know again that makes a loud sound. Anything
Wow, I didn't
outside.
even think of that one. Thanks, Manny.
Yeah.
When
Oh
that
wow.
happens in a game that I run, you'll know what happened. Yeah, one of those scenarios they get into right at the beginning of
Yeah.
the book is that there's this guy and you're not going to shoot me because you're just gonna, basically kill yourself with all the walkers you're going to attract. And of course they shoot him and,
Yeah, and
things
then
happen. So just to briefly mention, well, we'll probably mention it again later, but the ambulance scenario that's here in the core rule book is what I was able to play at PAX Unplugged.
hmm,
And it surprised me now having familiarity with the Alien role-playing game and the stress dice in that. It was surprising to me how fast the stress dice ramped up in Walking Dead as opposed to Alien.
hmm.
It seemed like stress was piled on faster than you could count it, and everybody around me has all kinds of stress dice going on. I think that you do have the ability to shed it easier later, but still, it was incredible how things just escalate quickly in this game. In a
Hmm.
way, just like the exponential leap in threat levels expands the number of walkers that you're running into.
And again, there's charts like Walker Attack chart. At least you have a chart that helps you give you more creativity. And they have rules for swarms. And I have to say there are rules about what happens if you're fighting against more than one attacker. Chapter 6, Home and Away, pretty much broken up into two sections: the Haven, which we talked about already, and Going on Runs. And I love the examples they have with different havens, so you have an idea of what you can have as your space.
For going on runs, there's a way you can have the NPCs go, but like 2 out of those 6 results can be that they bring nothing back, and either none or only some of them come back. So NPCs going on runs based on the rules and the roll table then can be pretty brutal. Another aspect of that that's very important is in the very beginning of your campaign, you need to decide how far into the uh, the apocalypse, I guess you may as well refer it to, how far are you into this? Because as they say in I think it was the trailer for the game, depending on, if it's recent, the supplies you're going to find are maybe more prevalent and in good condition. But the further out you go, I mean, food expires, medical, uh, medicines expire. There's more chance that people have ransacked things. So resources become more and more scarce over time. So, depending on when you choose to start your campaign in the timeline, it can vastly affect those things. So that maybe if you're later in the timeline, you're not going out to search more, and you are actually depending on your own capability to make things, grow food, maybe even repair weapons instead of find weapons. So, I think that your timeline you choose can really be important as far as going on runs. Like, what is your run going to be for?
Chapter 7, running the game, it's self explanatory. Everything that you've read about in the last few chapters, how to make this all work in your game.
Except the interesting thing about chapter 7, running the game, they do say, and I quote, that the most it is arguably the most important tool for the GM is challenges. So that even though I believe that the foundation of the game, bringing your characters to life and giving them a story of their own, is wrapped up in your drives, your issues, and your relationships to the people around you, both player and NPC. The challenges are those in the moment things that you normally have to, like, okay, this is something that we're on the clock to do. It could be a broken down engine, it could be somebody sick, you got to get medicine, maybe you got to repair a roof. And if you don't, you have an increased chance of people maybe catching pneumonia because you're exposed to the elements. So your challenges are really what light the fire under the butt of the players.
Hmm.
As But in the meantime, all those other things that I mentioned, those are the things that give you the nuances about how you are affected by achieving while you're achieving those goals, rather.
I think my favorite part about this chapter is that there's examples of factions. What is their haven like? What is their capacity in defense? What are their key NPCs? What's their goal and their own challenges? I think that's great. For me, it's easy to cheat because again, I watched the show, I've read the comic books, but I think if you're a game master may not know this world very well, and maybe not be into like survival horror in general, I think these are great examples to have, so you can learn from it and build your own world from it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely agree. Yeah, the tools that you're provided for creating your haven, and like you said, the examples are great. An interesting aspect too that I like about this, which you normally only see in an investigative game or even like the board game, The Fury of Dracula, is rumors.
Mm,
So, there's this whole aspect of you're trying to discover what's going on out there. And depending on your ability to, interact with other people or find information, these rumors can turn into actionable information, or they might lead you to a dead end or something worse. So, that's really great element that you can use to just tease your players into further game loops and other
mm.
challenges.
Some information about travel. So you have weather, the different types of ruins and encounters you'll see along the way of your traveling, which is kind of cool. It's kind of like the opposite of the One Ring. The One Ring also has journey rules, but this is much more, definitely much more dangerous, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Um,
the other thing that I actually like about this section is when they talk about the difference between free play and season play. To me, the thought of season play is interesting because if you're going to agree upon a certain number of sessions that we're going to do for this season, and say we say, okay, we're just going to do 6 sessions, 6 game sessions. Is going to be this season, but maybe we have a goal or something we need to achieve by the end of the season, some point we want to reach. Then it kind of puts you on the clock in that sense too. So there's your challenges that you have from session to session, but a season gives you the bigger challenge that you're trying to achieve or some point you're trying to reach. So in a way, it gives you that the bigger ticking clock that's then filled with the small things you have to do to get there. And I think in a way that's also good to give people a reason to show up for your session.
mm.
Hey, we've only got so many sessions for the season, so it's important that we make it and not just, hey, I'm sorry things got caught up. Even though life happens, we all know, and try to be as forgiving as we can. It just gives you one more reason why showing up to each session is a little bit more important and a little more engaging and meaningful.
So, the last chapter, last but not least, Atlanta, the campaign setup. I know you played the Golden Ambulance, and I'll ask you about that in a second. But you know what's surprisingly my favorite part of this whole chapter? The solo play at the end. Um,
Absolutely.
just because I've noticed now recently with Free League, there's been an interest in a lot of solo play. They released
Mhm.
a Vaesen one. Oh man,
Simbarum,
Simbarum.
the
You
One
know,
Ring,
yes, the One
has
Ring.
Strider mode.
Yes, yes, exactly. I'm impressed that they. So before those books were separate, you had to buy those separately, either Drive to RPG or the local gaming store. But now this is part of the book, so it's you have that option now that if you want to try out the system yourself or just play for fun, and I thought the rules for it was good. I actually tried a little bit of it just to see because I'm like, all right, how much does this help me play on my own? And I think it does a great job. The charts are amazing. I think for it.
Yeah. No, I think that it's a super great tool to also maybe plan a campaign,
Mm.
that you can use those tools to see what's this going to look like. So you can sort of sandbox it yourself. And then, depending on how cooperative you're going to make that experience with the players, it really lets you at least get an outline
Mm.
of what things could look like. Even though, it's random, for solo play, but you also have the capability to just mix it up by using that system.
You know, if you have an NPC that the players like, or if for some reason that maybe they don't have to like the NPC, but let's say the NPC goes their own way and kind of like wondering, like, oh, did this NPC survive on their own? Um, that solo play might be a good way of testing that, to see whether or not they survived or not.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. Maybe you want to figure out something. There's a more important NPC, and you want to give them a little bit more of a history than what's in the standard NPC creation rules.
But you've played the Golden Ambulance at PAX Unplugged, one of the scenarios in this game.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts about it, without spoiling too much?
Right. Well, I feel that it's like props on a stage. They say when there's a play on stage, no prop is there for no reason. So, when I would say the thing that taught me, which is interesting about the scenario, is that everything sort of matters. So, as you see vehicles or things are a certain way, then um, it there's like clues. It's like almost like being Sherlock Holmesy. But then once you get into it and things start to escalate, that's when I saw how stress dice, and it could be just that scenario, or maybe just the way that because we only had an hour, it could be the way the GM also wanted to sort of relate to us the stressful nature, the exhilaration of the Walking Dead world, that he used that to ramp up the threat level as we kept adding dice because we were messing up or setting off an explosion or someone was shooting. It started out, you're quiet, you're investigating things, but then things start to go increase. You've got to be thoughtful about what your characters are, your actions matter. Where you go on a map can cut yourself off from everybody else, and you might just corner yourself, paint yourself into the corner with a bunch of walkers. So yeah, there's definitely this heightened, as the action progresses, things just get more and more intense. And then you've eventually got to find a way to escape or de-escalate it. So it was a really good snippet of how bad things can get, while you're just trying to do something as simple as get some medicine to help some sick people that are back at your haven.
And again, this takes place in Atlanta, so it gives you some maps, some descriptions about the what's in the area, the factions, and adventure seeds and so forth.
The appendix is fabulous. The tables and the charts in there are almost everything you'd want for creating your world if you feel a little stuck. But again, flashing back to that, how I feel they're weighted as far as when you look at the locations. So they give you this huge chart about here's different locations that you could have. And what's really cool is it also talks about or gives you reference to how looted are those places. And you, as of course, as the game master, can adjust that, or make up reasons why, even though it might be later in the timeline, this one thing is fully stocked. Um, what I do kind of wish is that more common locations were more likely to be rolled instead of every location has an equal chance to be rolled. I think, as they say throughout the book, you can choose what you want to include. And if you're unsure, you can always roll the dice. Speaking of rolling the dice, one of the things I liked early on, which we really didn't mention, I think, was the lucky die. And that's just that the game master will say, well, let's roll a lucky die. And all they're going to say is, I'm going to roll a d6. And if I get these certain numbers, then this thing happens. That's a really cool way to just let the players see a random element of, did we get lucky or not? So I think that's what I would want to just emphasize at the end then is what are the important elements of the game? The ever-present threat of the walkers, scarcity of resources, other people that can be both a boon and a bane to your existence, and the tools that translate that into a game element.
Hmm.
Yeah, I suppose that's it. Walkers, resources, people.
Yeah, so this is what's great about this game is that it's narrative game, but also a very cooperative game. You have to work together. To me, it looks like the greatest threat of this game is not the walkers; it's the people you may be working with, which I think that's pretty fascinating. And I think that this game translates that very well. My concluding thoughts, really, I think this book is fantastic. I love not just the rules for the game and how it's presented, but the design of the game is fantastic. I love the art. Each page looks like almost looks like it's been on the floor for some time, but it's not dirty enough so it obscures your reading in any way. Yeah, it's the fonts are great, colors is great, artwork is great. If I ever try to think something critical about it, I'm trying to think like, okay, what bad can I say about this, just to be fair in my review. The only thing I could say is that this book should have come out honestly like 6 years ago. It's a shame because I think this is a great role playing game, but I'm concerned that people at this point are tired of The Walking Dead and they're gonna just kind of look at this and go, like I'm done with that show,
Mhm.
and that's a shame because this is actually really good. And I'm starting to think, can I combine this with Blade Runner and Alien in some way? Now the rules are different, but they're similar enough. They could tweak something together, but
Didn't you
that's
bring
me.
that up with your interview with Metius?
I did.
Seems like I remembered that.
Hopefully one day they'll may come out with a conversion book. I would love to see that. The book by itself, it's fantastic. I know you have a hard copy, and I'm gonna get my own hard copy once it appears in my local gaming store. It's a great
Mhm.
book.
Yeah, yeah, I think I'm on my concluding thoughts. I'd say that the I didn't even think too much about the art, but you're right. The production of the core rule book is fabulous. It conveys that post-apocalyptic feel. I don't think there's really I couldn't think of any wasted space or text in the book, although it's subjective. I still feel that it's like 160 some pages. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. It's
Like 180, 190. It's
180
not.
PDF, but yeah, everything in that book is really it gives you what you need and nothing more. It doesn't give you stuff that you're really going to find useless or, I suppose in a way the show and the comic books provide us a lot of context as well. So
Mm,
they can skimp on some things, but they definitely give you enough to do what you need.
yeah.
Um, Another thing that I think that is really more present in this game than maybe any other game I played is that out of any game, this one I could relate to the most because it's literally set in the world in which I live right now. I
Mm,
mean, I experience this world every day. It's just I have society still functioning around me. But if society broke down, I mean, this is it. So I know what a firehouse is like. I know what an airport is like. It's really limited
mm,
by my worldly experiences in my own life,
mm,
but that I can relate to these characters, even if I can't relate exactly to the situation they're in. The world they're in is it's very familiar to me because I've known it my whole life. So that's where I feel like those important aspects to this game are the zombies are the ever-present threat, but the resources in the world that I once knew is no longer what it was, and that the relationships that my character has are what's the most important thing that will help get me through to survive another day.
Thank you for checking out our review of the Walking Dead Universe role playing game by Free League Publishing. Again, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. Leave a comment below if you have a copy of this book. Let us know what you think of this. And yeah, take care, everyone. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.